Alright, welcome to Dispelling the Deception. This is the first episode of the political party that started a gang and they wore pointy hats. Yes, this is talking about the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK that is so hot in topic today. Seems every virtue signaler is out there rallying against white supremacy without even realizing the roots of it. If you want to get rid of a problem, you don't attack the branches or the fruit of the problem or the seeds of the problem. You get the problem at the root. You don't cut it off at the root. Just like a weed, it will grow back. So you have to pull the root out completely, not nip it in the bud. That only stops the seeds, but the problem still remains. So we got to get to the root. All right. Sorry about that ramble, but here we go. This is from September 14th, 2016. The medium, less deplorables. Pupillus Americanus is the one who put this out. It says, Democrats are the party of the KKK. He says, given the fact that your party created the KKK, I find it ironic that you're taking the time to explain how Lincoln's flaws somehow erased his legacy as a great emancipator? As a great emancipator. Yeah. Does the fact that your party invented the KKK to kill African American Republicans enter into your calculus at all? Making fun of their maths, apparently. Each election cycle, many of my Democratic friends, like you, attempt to paint Republicans as racist. They attempt to link our candidates to David Duke and the KKK when I point out that it is the Democratic Party that has a legacy of racism. They suggest that the parties somehow switched. Somehow they were able to erase their legacy and endow it into the Republican Party. The Democratic Party may have given up on their use of the stick in favor of the carrot to control the African American community, but it is an absolute lie to suggest the Republican Party has adopted their deplorable past. The reality is the Republican Party's legacy is one of emancipation, voting rights, civil rights, and freedom for all Americans. Throughout the history of our great nation, the Democrat oppressed the Republican Party's social justice efforts. After the Civil War, the Republicans elected 23 African Americans, 13 of whom were ex-slaves, to Congress. It took the Democrats 60 more years to elect an African American to Congress. Deplorable. In the South, the Democrats held out until 2 years after I was born, 1973, to elect an African American. Here in Texas, the Republican Party was founded by African Americans in 1876, and African Americans across other states followed suit. Uh-oh. See, there's a problem when you guys have a narrative and you keep pushing it out there. I'm going to get to the bottom of it. So, let's just put it this way. If you're still supporting Hillary Clinton, the Obamas, Joe Biden, realize that they were all friends of Byrd. Who is Senator Byrd, you may ask? Oh, I may have something for that here in a little bit. Let's go on to the next one. It's called factmyth.com. This article was published in February 9th, 2017, and it was updated March 31st, 2020. I'm not going to go through these whole articles, just the main front page and top paragraph. It says, Fact or myth? The Democrats were the party of the Ku Klux Klan and slavery. Fact. researched by Thomas Mc, DeMichel, something like that, states right solid South Democrats, not the same thing as modern social liberals. The parties changed and the KKK changed parties, according to this person. Oh, whoops. Didn't mean to do that. Let's do this. It's a little caveat that you can see right here. It says, even though a lot has changed, historically speaking, the Democratic Party was the party of the Ku Klux Klan and slavery. Goes on. The Democratic Party's dark roots of slavery and the KKK. How to comfort that while the Democrats, how to confirm that while the Democrats used to be the party of the solid South conservatives. That is no longer true today. I don't know about that. That last article was just saying you guys can't even do that, and then went to there's a USA Today post that they were stumbling, doing linguistic gymnastics to try to deny the Democratic's roots in slavery. Says the KKK and slavery both have their roots in Democratic Party. However, the Southern Bloc conservatives, the Solid South, have increasingly favored the Republican Party over time. Thus, today, the faction who once supported the KKK and slavery now mostly supports the Republican Party. I call bullshit on that. Given this, the old Democrats were the party of the KKK and slavery talking point. While true, it's often used in misleading ways. Well, during the Trump and Hillary Clinton, what you would call it, race war, presidential race war that was going on, I believe $20,000 were donated to one of the presidential candidates' election campaign by the KKK. And he didn't give that money to Trump. That individual gave that money to the Hillary Clinton campaign. $20,000 donated by the KKK to the Clinton campaign. And then this guy has a whole bunch of citations, 6 citations. And it goes to postmodernism. So, this is why I'm not going through them all, but I'm giving you the evidence to lay it out in front of you so you can disseminate it. I will put in the description box the citations for these articles so you can look them up yourself. The Daily Bell. I haven't seen so many Democrats in a while, or in white, since they started the KKK. Staff News and Analysis. Yes, Democrats did start the Ku Klux Klan, and it's still the party of racism. This is February 7th, 2019 by Joe Jarvis. Says, I don't want people to think better of Republicans. I want people to be critical of Democrats as they are of Republicans. Both parties are really terrible, but Democrats too often get a pass because they are better at branding and marketing. Just like the slave owners were better at branding and marketing, right? They branded their slaves. The last time a Republican presidential candidate got more than 15% of the black vote was 1960. And yet the Democrats had a former KKK member in the U.S. Senate until he died in 2010. In fact, Robert Byrd wasn't just the KKK. He recruited 150 friends to start a chapter. Yeah. That's just sickening right there. Senator Robert Byrd used the N-word on live television, and I can play that for you here in a little bit. in 2001. And when he was re-elected as the senator from West Virginia in 2006. Compare that to the current Democrat governor from one state over Virginia, Ralph Northam, dressed in blackface when he was 25, or KKK robes, as we don't know which. As pictured in his graduate school yearbook. This guy is a clown. I agree. His defense was that he doesn't think it's either one or the two in the racist picture, because he distinctly remembers wearing blackface on a different occasion. So he denies that the picture evidence is him, because he did that on a separate occasion, admitting that he did use blackface. This is a Democrat, not a Republican. Oh man. That time he says the only one that time he says he only applied a little bit of shoe polish to dress up as Michael Jackson, because that stuff is hard to get off. So okay, that doesn't make sense. Let's break it down like a Democrat would prosecuting a conservative. He says at that time, he says he only applied a little bit of shoe polish to dress up as Michael Jackson, because that stuff is hard to get off. How does he know that shoe polish is hard to get off your face? Must mean that there was another time where he did it in his graduation yearbook, where he put a lot of it on and he couldn't get it off. Parentheses, it says also his wife, I wonder how he knew how hard it was to get the shoe polish off. Yeah, I agree. And then in parentheses it says also his wife had to tell him it was inappropriate to do the moonwalk during his blackface apology news conference. Some people. See, so who is the racist one here? All right, here's the where he says the N-word. This is for historical purposes. I'm not the one saying this. This is a Fox News thing that was on national television. But I will try to bleep out the inappropriate word.
Race relations.
They're much, much better than they've ever been in my lifetime. I think this is my personal opinion, I think we talk about race too much. I think those problems are largely behind us. I think we can all profit by our mistakes. I think we've reached a new plateau, and I think it's going to keep going upward, that understanding and race relations. But I think
he sure does like that word race relations, and he think it's going up. Now this is Senator Robert Byrd, Mr. Ku Klux Klan himself, that recruited 150 of his friends to start a new Ku Klux Klan chapter. Shortly after this, he was re-elected as a senator. I bet you CNN was spinning that and not reporting it. This is an interview done by Fox News. Nothing changes, folks. Nothing changes.
I just think we talk so much about it that we helped, I think, create somewhat of an illusion. I think we try to have goodwill. My old mom told me, Robert, you can't go to heaven if you hate anybody. We practice that. There are white niggers.
Wow.
I've seen a lot of white niggers in my time. I'm going to use that word.
He just
But
we've
all
digging himself
we
a
just
hole,
need to
isn't
work
he?
together to make our country better. And I just soon quit talking about it so much.
Now, after our conversation Friday, I went back to visit with Senator Byrd, and he said there is a term I used in
And then listen to his explanation.
our discussion of race relations that people may misconstrue. And his office has put out the following statement regarding that. It is, quote, I apologize for the characterization I used on this program. The phrase dates back to my boyhood and has no place in today's society. As for my language, I had no intentions of casting aspersions on anyone of another race. In my attempt to articulate strongly held feelings, I may have offended people that I never intended to offend. Unfortunately, there are people in every race who would rather attack others simply because of ill-conceived false stereotypes based on skin color. People who do this are obstacles to positive race relations and become the stereotypes that they despise. But by working together and continually improving the understanding between the races, we can overcome these narrow-minded people and the obstacles that they represent.
He's talking about himself. Come on, guys. Really? Really? He's talking about himself. It's so obvious. Anyways, there's this other thing here from PragerU University. This lady is very knowledgeable, so let's just listen to her speak.
When you think about racial equality and civil rights, which political party comes to mind? The Republicans or the Democrats? Most people would probably say the Democrats, but this answer is incorrect. Since its founding in 1829, the Democratic Party has fought against every major civil rights initiative and has a long...
Did you hear what she said? Since its founding, they fought against every civil rights initiative.
Long history of discrimination. The Democratic Party defended slavery, started the Civil War, opposed Reconstruction, founded the Ku Klux Klan, imposed segregation, perpetrated lynchings, and fought against the Civil Rights Acts.
Now, this part right here about the lynchings, Robert Lynch, who was Ku Klux Klan member, I believe his name was Robert Lynch, and he was a Democrat. And what he would do is he would go around and they would call it's a lynching because his name was Lynch, and they would hang people. It's called democracy because they're Democrats. Democracy in action is a lynch mob. That's why we don't live in a democracy, we live in a republic.
Of the 1950s and 1960s. In contrast, the Republican Party was founded in 1854 as an anti-slavery party. Its mission was to stop the spread of slavery into the new Western territories with the aim of abolishing it entirely. This effort, however, was dealt a major blow by the Supreme Court in the 1857 case, Dred Scott versus Sandford. The court ruled that slaves aren't citizens, they're property. The 7 justices who voted in favor of slavery, all Democrats. The 2 justices who dissented, both Republicans.
Wow. So it's set up how it is right now on the Supreme Court. I mean, you have what? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans. But now we have 6 Democrats, a rhino, and 2 Republicans. Do you see the way the country's going? Only the Democrats voted for the measure that slaves are not people. Makes me sick.
The slavery question was, of course, ultimately resolved by a bloody civil war. The commander-in-chief during that war was the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, the man who freed the slaves. 6 days after the Confederate Army surrendered, John Wilkes Booth, a Democrat, assassinated President Lincoln. Lincoln's vice president, a Democrat named Andrew Johnson, assumed the presidency.
Okay, so after Lincoln was assassinated, his vice president, Andrew Johnson, assumed the presidency. Now listen to what this sly fox does. Now they all have ties to Freemasonry. All ties to Freemasonry.
But Johnson adamantly opposed Lincoln's plan to integrate the newly freed slaves into the South's economic and social order. Johnson and the Democratic Party were unified in their opposition to the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment, which gave blacks citizenship, and the 15th Amendment, which gave blacks the vote. All three passed only because of universal Republican support.
So the 13th Amendment in 1865, which abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment in 1866, which gave citizenship to the black Americans. And the 15th Amendment, which gave them the right to vote. All passed by the Republicans and all opposed by the Democrats.
During the era of Reconstruction, federal troops stationed in the South helped secure rights for the newly freed slaves. Hundreds of black men were elected to Southern state legislatures as Republicans, and 22 black Republicans served in the U.S. Congress by 1900. The Democrats did not elect a black man to Congress until 1935. But after Reconstruction ended, when the federal troops went home, Democrats roared back into power in the South. They quickly reestablished white supremacy across the region with measures like black codes, laws that restricted the ability of blacks to own property and run businesses, and they imposed poll taxes and literacy tests used to subvert black citizens' right to vote. And how was all of this enforced? By terror, much of it instigated by...
Kind of like Black Lives Matter, Antifa terror that's going on the streets last year and the years prior. Do you see what's going on here, people? Are you awakened yet? Do you need a cool glass of water to be dumped in your face so you become shocked and awake?
The Ku Klux Klan, founded by a Democrat, Nathan Bedford Forrest. As historian Eric Foner, himself a Democrat, notes, in effect, the Klan was a military force serving the interests of the Democratic Party. President Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, shared many views with the Klan. He resegregated many federal agencies and even screened the first movie ever played at the White House, the racist film, The Birth of a Nation, originally entitled The Klansman. A few decades later, the only serious congressional opposition to the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 came from Democrats. 80% of Republicans in Congress supported the bill, less than 70% of Democrats did.
Wow.
Democratic senators filibustered the bill for 75 days until Republicans mustered the few extra votes needed to break the logjam. And when all of their efforts to enslave blacks, keep them enslaved, and then keep them from voting had failed, the Democrats came up with a new strategy. If black people are going to vote, they might as well vote for Democrats. As President Lyndon Johnson was purported to have said about the Civil Rights Act, I'll have them voting Democrat for 200 years. So now, The Democratic Party prospers on the votes of the very people it has spent much of its history oppressing. Democrats falsely claim that the Republican Party is the villain, when in reality, it's the failed policies of the Democratic Party that have kept blacks down.
Yep.
Massive government welfare has decimated the black family. Opposition to school choice has kept them trapped in failing schools. Politically correct policing has left black neighborhoods.
Did you hear that? Politically correct policing. What is Black Lives Matter doing? Politically correct policing. They want the police to be more politically correct. How politically correct has gone too damn far. Okay? Everybody says, oh, there's a systemic racism issue. Yeah, and the systemic racism issue is the Democratic Party. Funny how these people that accuse the left hand don't know that the right hand has poo on it. Sickening, irritating. It irritates me that they have brainwashed the masses to not know the truth. Nobody told me this. I had to find this out for myself because something wasn't sitting right. I was like, one day, which party started the KKK? Holy crap, it was the Democrats all along. I guess a leopard cannot change its spots, but it can dye the rest of its coat the color of the spots, huh?
Defenseless against violent crime. So when you think about racial equality and civil rights, which political party should come to mind? I'm Carol Swain, professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University for Prager University.
So to me, Vanderbilt seems like a fairly good college, if you think about it. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. This has been Dispelling the Deception, the political party that started a gang and they wore pointy hats. Please like, comment, follow, subscribe. If you don't agree with me, please leave a comment. You can find me on many different resources and all of that fun stuff. Different sites. Yeah. But anyways, this has been Josh with Dispelling the Deception. Y'all be blessed and shalom.